You know that loneliness, that ache in the heart of every one of us that has nothing to do with the proximity or closeness of other people? The king of the polar bear says, you know, we've been watching you. You're not really up here for the hunting, are you? You ever watch a soldier surrender like in a theater of combat? The illustration's perfect. You'll see the soldier take the rifle, very slowly lay it on the ground, sit down on the side of the road. So in 1 through 3, I give it up. 4 through 7, I clean it up. 8 and 9, I make it up. 10, 11, and 12, I keep it up. And I'm behind a dumpster in Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles with a fifth of whiskey, reciting chapter 5 out of the big book. And the bum next to me is like, will you shut up, man? You're ruining my high. Many people in AA, this is like purgatory. And what that means for me is to be caught between two worlds. Finally, the captain gets on the radio and he says, we are a battleship. We demand you turn your course 10 degrees to the north. My name is Adam. I am an alcoholic. I want to first thank the committee for inviting me to come talk tonight. It's an honor and a privilege to be asked to participate in Alcoholics Anonymous. Ultimately, it's a responsibility to give back what was so freely given to me. I want to thank Ed for all his hospitality. Thank him and Central Office for inviting me. Welcome to the people that are new. You know, if you're trying AA one more time, if you don't want to be here tonight, if you don't think this will work for you. I didn't get to Alcoholics Anonymous because I had a bad weekend. You know, I had a couple of bad decades. And for me, like a lot of us, eventually this becomes a matter of life and death. I mean, every meeting has their perpetual newcomer, you know, especially in a smaller community. You know, we see that lost soul. And, you know, that was me. I stood up for 17 years in AA, and it became ridiculous. I had so many chips and key tags. You know, I could have played poker with them. I remember one secretary saying, give them back. And I did that walk of shame over and over and over again. And what I would do as a newcomer is I would go into your head and I would look back at myself and I would think, gosh, what a loser. Why can't she get this? What's wrong with you? And I know the old timers were judging me. You know, if you're new, we're judging. And my home group makes bets. I'm not that spiritual. I love it when they say don't judge anybody in AA. You ever hear that? Don't judge. And then what do they tell you 5 minutes later? Stick with the winners. That's not confusing, right? I can remember sitting in my counselor's office in detox, you know, and I'm across this big table and he looks at me and he says, now, Adam, don't make any major changes in your first year. So I get out of there. I get a sponsor. My first meeting, first thing they tell me, you got to change everything. Right? Don't make any major decisions in your first year. Anybody seen the third step? Right? How about don't get a relationship in your first year? No one knows that that works. No one's ever done it. I always look for the guy that's not laughing. Right? There's always a saint in the crowd. If you got a halo, don't let it choke you. But the one I love is God doesn't give us more than we could handle. If I really believed that statement, if God didn't give me more than I could handle, I wouldn't need God's help. And the longer I've been sober, the longer I've been separated from alcohol, the more I've eventually come to terms with the fact that I absolutely, desperately need God's help. I need your help. And if your new help is the dirtiest 4-letter word in AA, the hardest thing for many of us to do is to relinquish control, to admit complete defeat. So if you're new, welcome. And I look back now and I thank God for the unconditional love of the old timers. A lot of the old timers that aren't here with us anymore. That said stuff to me like, you know what, kid, don't even bother taking chips. Just sit in the back. Shut up. You know, in a loving way, right? But they also made it really clear to me, and if you're new, I hope you hear this, They made it really clear to me that if and when I was ready, because they could see it by my demeanor, my lack of interest, my fidgety nature, they could see that it wasn't right now. But those old timers made it really clear to me that if and when I was ready, that the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous would always be open to a drunk like me. And I think looking back at that experience now, next to my parents, AA is the closest thing to unconditional love that an alcoholic of my type will ever experience. No matter how many lives I destroyed, how many promises I broke, how many cars I wrecked, right? How many despicable, shameful things I did. And if you're a drunk like me, it's shameful to be the family alcoholic. The degradation and shame that comes with watching me, live my life that way, waking up in one more rubber room and not knowing how I got there. The shame that comes with this lifestyle, getting that horrific phone call. Watching those two parents that had all those hopes and dreams for me, that set up a fund for my education, that dressed me and dropped me off at school and had all those hopes for me as a little boy. To watch those two broken people watch me burn my life to the ground to the point where my mother had moved and didn't leave a forwarding address when I was in treatment. And despite all of that shame, the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous has always been open to people like us. And I think if I lived to be 100 years old, I could never, ever pay AA back for the love and the kindness that some of you people have shown me. They say if you like everybody in AA, you're not going to enough meetings. So eventually, all that being said, I eventually started coming to meetings drunk. Now, the interesting thing about Alcoholics Anonymous 2018, if you see a person drunk in an AA meeting these days, people say stuff like, "Oh my gosh, what's he doing here?" And you, if you're new, may find that ironic, but you don't see a lot of wet alcoholics in AA because of this event called treatment, which has grown up about AA in the last 20 years, which is now a $35 billion a year industry. It's up there with annuities in the Wall Street Journal, right? And treatment kind of swoops us up in our most desperate moments, throws us into yoga class. Right? Craft hour. I'm making like belt buckles and bongs. Nature walks. Now, there's a few young people here. 30 years ago, there were not a lot of young people. I remember being 16, 17, 18 years old in AA. And, the old timers at that time would say, "You know what, kid, we spilled more than you drank." And we're like, "You know what, Pops, we didn't spill any. That's why we got here sooner." But for 17 years, I recycled through the rooms. If you're new, we have a chapter in the big book, the Chapter to Wise. And if you read the Chapter to Wise, it's very descriptive. It really describes 4 types of alcoholics. It enumerates them: type 1, type 2, type 3. And the 4th type of alcoholic described in the Chapter to Wise is the type of alcoholic that's been placed in one institution after another. The type of alcoholic that typically drinks on his way home from the hospital. Sounds familiar? And in those 17 years that I recycled through the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, that is what I eventually became. By the time I finally got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd gone through residential treatment for alcoholism 28 times. I know, not 28 days like the movie. This isn't Hollywood. 28 consecutive times. And I wore that like a badge of honor. I thought, that's what made me an alcoholic. And I remember telling my sponsor, "Hey, I went through treatment 28 times. I was hoping that would get rid of the guy. Loser. Go find someone that's willing. Ruined his batting average, right?" And he laughed when I tell him I went through treatment 28 times. And he says, "Adam, that doesn't really make you an alcoholic." And I thought, "You're kidding." He says, "Oh no, that just means you paid $500,000 for a big book." And I didn't think that was funny. And I'm not going to start citing and quoting pages tonight out of the big book. But page 101 of the big book says any scheme that attempts to shield the alcoholic from temptation is doomed to failure. See, treatment was a great place to fatten me up for another run, but treatment never solved the problem. And as an alcoholic, like so many of us, I always thought the problem was liquor. I thought it was alcohol. And I remember someone in AA saying to me, Adam, if alcohol is your problem, that drink, that shot glass, that 12-pack, that little glass of Chardonnay, if that's your problem, you're probably not an alcoholic. And then in the very next breath, he says to me, and if you are in fact an alcoholic, the type that's described in the doctor's opinion in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, your problem is an alcohol. And I remember thinking, what? It went right over my head. It was like some kind of cruel riddle. I drank over that for years. But when I got around a home group of big book literalists that turned the statements in the big book into questions and directed them at me, was I incapable of being honest with myself? Did I in fact drink because I liked the effect produced by alcohol? Was I restless, irritable, and discontent by nature? Was my greatest obsession that somehow someday I would control and enjoy my drinking at the same time? When I went through those considerations, for the first time I started to see the truth. And one of those truths I saw is that I was never really able to live with alcohol. Even as a teenager, I was peeing in my pants, drooling on my gas, passed out under the bleachers. My nickname in 8th grade was Space Cadet. I couldn't find homeroom. Really, people are picking high schools, I'm already picking rehabs. But see, if you're new, alcoholism comes in people. It doesn't come in 6-packs or 12-packs or shot glasses or glasses of Chardonnay. And the greater aspect of this spiritual illness centering in my mind, if going through those considerations shows me anything at all, it shows me that an alcoholic of my type, this type, cannot live without alcohol, not successfully, not happily. And part of what it really means for me to be an alcoholic, if I'm honest about my relationship with liquor, is that I have a mind that will continue to take me back to that first drink. What it really means for me to be an alcoholic is that I seem to have this mind that will eventually lead me back. It's almost like my default mode. It's interesting because I was sponsoring a group of computer programmers, and they were so quick to point out the language that Bill Wilson uses in our basic text in 1939 and how advanced that was. Because today we use the word program all the time, right? One of the definitions of a program is a sequential set of instructions that brings about a result, right? Think about it. What do you do when you get a corrupt file on a computer? Listen to the language. Oh, you put in a recovery disk. And what's its function? It restores it, right? Second step to an earlier point in the process. Look at the language. Then he tells me that step 10 and 11 are like the viral scan. And it went right over my head. I had no idea what he was talking about. Because for 17 years, I confused the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous with the program. And although they seem, and they are, equally important, they are not the same thing. It never occurred to me when he says principles before personalities, they might be implying that the program would have a little more weight than the opinions in the rooms. See, the fellowship gives me enthusiasm. It gives me inspiration. It gives me encouragement. It gives me hope. It gives me brotherly love. It gives me compassion. Some people even get relationships and employment here, right? But if you put an alcoholic of my type into a large group of happy people like this, I seem to get sicker in the rooms of AA without a program. I become more separate, more different, and more alone. And what that means is separated from God. It means different than every single person here. That's what we call terminal uniqueness, and alone. You know that loneliness, that ache in the heart of every one of us that has nothing to do with the proximity or closeness of other people. It actually has to do with my inability to connect. And you put a couple of drinks in me, I'm calling people from 5th grade saying, I love you. I go right into amends. Well, come on, you put a couple of drinks at me, I'm at one with God. I am connected to every soul of this room. I lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in my fellows, right? and I am at peace with self. And unless I can find that sense of comfort and ease that I have always sought through alcohol, through these simple steps, these instructions, this way of life, a drunk like me will never stay here. That's why we say the view from Alcoholics Anonymous from the center is totally different than it is from the outside. That you can fall off the edge, I cannot fall off the middle. And I start to understand this thing from a completely different perspective. A lot of times I think I got to AA the day before I died, and that's why it looked so different to me. And I look back at 17 years of failure, even in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and what I see today is my defiance towards spiritual principles. The original manuscript in chapter 5, if you go back and look, it said, rarely have we seen a person fail that's thoroughly followed our directions. It doesn't say path. Now, if you're like me, I don't like directions. I don't even like being told not to do something I already don't want to do, right? That's me. I will argue with anybody about anything at any time. You tell me black, I'll say it's white. You tell me big, I'll say it's small. You tell me to go left, I'll go right with an attitude. And then I'll blame you for eternity. That's why we say denial's an acronym. It stands for don't even notice I am lying. Oh, think about it. You could tell an alcoholic, you can't tell him much. Oh, you don't believe it? Try sponsoring somebody. And what that means is you can lead me into the gates of hell, but you can't push me into heaven. And if you're new, what that means, when Bill Wilson says attraction rather than promotion, is that eventually a drunk of my type will have to get to AA on my own terms. Not because mommy wants me to, not because the Silver Living wants me to, not because my girlfriend wants me to, not because the parole office wants me to. Where I live on the west side of LA, they all get sober for the trust fund. But eventually it has to be on my terms. And if you're new, my experience now is hope doesn't matter to a drunk like me until I'm hopeless. You think hope matters to me when I got a couple $100,000 in the bank, a hot girlfriend, and a brand new Harley? You think I need hope? Please. And God's not going to matter to someone like me until my back's against the wall. I can remember what it was like being on that gurney bleeding out. And I got the paramedics around me with the jug, the little paddles. All I know is God. Right? I've got my head in that toilet every morning, puking out my stomach with the dry heaves. Who prays more than drunks like us? Come on. I get 3 days away from that last drink, and you got to write this whole elaborate chapter called We Agnostics to try to come at me from every angle to establish there might be a power in this universe other than me. And you start to see the arrogance that blocks me, the things that block me from God. Dr. Harry Tiebout, I was talking about it today. He's one of the contributing members to some of our literature. He's in the big book. He says the 4 qualities of an alcoholic are grandiose, sensitive, immature, and omnipotent, and those are our finer qualities. Right? Stick that in a personals app. Nick, the selfish, dishonest, resentful, and afraid. You wonder why dating's difficult? So one of the things that happened to me is I get to one more treatment center. Thank God we don't look like our stories, right? I get to one more treatment center. I'm 120 pounds. I stink like urine. My fingers are dirty. I'm dying. I'm missing a bunch of teeth. I look like I just got out of a concentration camp. You know how we look, right? I'm in my nightgown with my ass hanging out, judging the speaker, thinking I got it going on. I mean, we're the only people that can actually be on the curb and look down at the world. I got 2 speeds, grandiose and comatose. And I'm strutting around the detox, bragging about robbing race trials. I finally did my 4-step. It was a bread truck. And it was empty. So I'm sitting there in this treatment center in my nightgown with my fellow associates. And this woman comes in on an H&I panel, which is hospitals and institutions. In some parts of the country, we call it corrections and treatment. But she's on an H&I panel. By the way, our H&I on the west side of LA is about 250 people. It's about this size. And we meet once a month, and we're fighting each other to get on panels to talk to people in treatment centers that don't care. But H&I probably has the lowest relapse rate in all of recovery. The cohesiveness and the fact that they're almost creating a 12-step experience by putting us in a place where we are the first point of contact with those new people. And people still don't get that. So this woman's on her H&I panel, she's doing her AA talk, and at the end of her talk, she looks us all up and down like this, and she says, if I could give you all the gift of recovery, if I could give it to you, I wouldn't do it. And I looked at her, and I looked at the guy next to me, and I said, what a bitch. No disrespect. And then she said something that would later change my life. She said, the reason I wouldn't give you the gift of recovery, the reason I wouldn't give it to you is because I wouldn't rob you of the journey. And if you're new, I've come to understand that that journey to recovery, that journey to surrender, that gift of desperation is personal. If you're new, I could write all day long on step 1. Until I'd beaten down that liquor store door at 5:59 a.m. over and over and over, or, paid the clerk at 7-Eleven $100 for a 6-pack, or driven all the way to Mexico to get to the bar, which is right here. I'm sure that's not an issue. But until I'd done all those disgusting, diabolical things that many of us do on that journey to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, you think writing about step 1 was going to save me? I had to have an experience with hopelessness. I had to get to a place where I saw that self-reliance failed me. We were talking about it today, this term that God cannot use a man till he comes to the end of himself. And many of us never get there. Many of us never get to that place of desperation. And I don't want to bash the therapeutic community, but, if you're new, it's very interesting because I got to a place in my life where my head couldn't get enough or my body couldn't take any more. And if you've ever seen what that looks like, it looks like knocking on death's door. When my head can't get enough and my body can't take any more, God means something totally different. It means grow or die. Then I got 2 choices, the same choices the book talks about. Go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of my intolerable situation, right? Skid Row's full of people like that. And what's the other choice? Oh, accept spiritual help. And then it says, these are not easy choices. Really? Go step over to your local Costco. You got jails, institutions, and death. Happy, joyous, and free. I know, it's a no-brainer. You step over to my cell in Men's Central Jail, you ask me that question, I'm scratching my head thinking, how bad an alcoholic gal? Can I talk to my parole officer, my therapist, and my MFT? Get back to you on Monday? And I start to see how I will minimize, justify, and rationalize that burst rate. To concede to my innermost self. The word concede means to surrender with a fight. Doesn't every drunk defend their right to drink? Wouldn't it be abnormal not to? We all say my worst day sober is better than my best day drinking. I'm like, really? But my worst day sober is better than my last day drinking. And when I get some perspective and I start to see the truth, and I start to understand for many people in AA, this is like purgatory. And what that means for me is to be caught between 2 worlds. I can't live out there drunk anymore, right? Because it's too painful. But I can't be sober and happy at the same time because I'm unwilling to let go of my old ideas. I have a coin that says the greatest battle in a man's life is not against his brother or sister, it is against himself. So if you're new, imagine me throwing you a life raft, and you look at the life raft and you say, you know, I was looking for a blue one. I really don't like the way you threw it. So you can understand the difficulty if you're new with sponsorship, right? It is not denial about the problem that stops someone like me from having an amazing life. Most of us don't have to think twice about whether or not we're alcoholic. It's not that. For me, it's denial about the solution. That these time-tested steps, this roadmap to spiritual success, this way of life isn't going to work for me. And you know why I think that? Because it wasn't my idea. So if you're new, think about this. We're the only people in the world that actually want a reward because we ran out of a burning building. Right? I think Johnny Parsons said, like, congratulating a cowboy with hemorrhoids for not riding his horse. Wow. So if you're feeling heroic because you gave up your big Saturday night in El Paso to hang out with us, this is the only place on God's earth where they'll applaud because you came in to save your own life. Right? I mean, come on. You're sitting here in an AA meeting wondering when the miracle's going to happen. You're in an AA meeting on a Saturday night. It's happened. I was told my sobriety is God's gift to me. What I do with my sobriety is my gift to God. There are 3 prayers in this life. The first one is, God help me, right? The alcoholic prayer. The second prayer, God give me greatest distraction on earth. The prayer I'd never said was, God use me. And I end up with you guys. Oh, I can't tell you the kindness and the love and the... God, you've overfed me this weekend. It's been ridiculous. Mexican food, and Mexican food. But you got LA beat. You got LA beat here, I'll tell you that. They can't do it like you guys. So I start to understand these ideas, these very simple ideas. One of the things my sponsor asked me to do, he said, Adam, I want you to buy a black suit. And I said, why? And he got serious. And he said, you know, if you stick around AA, unfortunately, you're going to go to a lot of funerals. It'll come in handy. Then he laughed and he said, oh, and if you get drunk again, at least we'll have something nice to bury you in. It's dark humor, but it's true. If you baby the alcoholic, you'll bury him. I need to hear the truth about alcoholism. It is fatal. It is progressive. It is chronic. It's like being on a train. The train only goes to one place. Jails, institutions, and death. That's the only place it goes. For me, powerless doesn't mean I can't drink. It absolutely, with all certainty, means I will drink again. That I have no effective mental defense against that first drink. Very much in line with what the book says. I cannot bring into my consciousness with any sufficient force the pain and suffering of a week a month ago. I never took my first drink drunk with what I think is a sound mind. Yeah, you're looking at thousands of years of recovery in a room like this. Because between me and that decision, there was a deep and effective spiritual experience. And that was very profound to me. You know, I don't want to bash the therapeutic community, but, and I said this earlier today at the workshop, going through treatment 28 times, I started to speak a foreign language in treatment. Oh, you know what it is, right? It's called victimese. Oh, I don't understand how the drink bone connects to the jail bone. It's like I need a class for that. It's kind of like I met her in rehab. I can't believe she drank. See, if you went to the workshop, that would have been funnier. I knew he was a crackhead. Can't believe he stole my iPhone. So eventually what happens is I go through this process and the steps is I see how I make decisions based on self, that later leave me in a position to be hurt. My experience is if I do not connect those dots through inventory, I will continue to play victim. Victims don't stay sober. And eventually I had to become separated from all those events. Wherever there's hysterics, there's historics. Wherever I had an emotional response, I began to have history. It seems like normal people are intellect over emotion. They think, they process, and they act, right? I'm exactly the opposite. I'm emotion over intellect. I act, process, and then think. Oops, 10th step. Oh, please, we're the only people that burn bridges ahead of us. Oh, if you're laughing, you're relating. Normal people don't think that's funny. So I start to understand a little more about the problem, the idea, and the thinking that precedes that training. But I still have to be in service. Now, for you new people, I do a lot of H&I. Right, I should. I'm an alumni from everywhere. And just as an illustration, we have a really big VA in our area. We have people come from all over California to the Veterans Administration in LA, and we have these really big meetings. You know, we get a room full of soldiers, and we do these AA panels, and of course they ask us to pick a topic. And I'm a smartass, so I pick surrender. Room gets dead quiet, especially Marines. But if you're new, one of the greatest illustrations of surrender I'd ever heard came out of one of those panels at the VA. And if you're new, you might want to relate this to your drinking. You ever watch a soldier surrender, like in a theater of combat? The illustration's perfect. You'll see the soldier take the rifle, very slowly lay it on the ground, sit down on the side of the road, wait for someone to tell him what to do. Think about it. When you got 40 AK-47s pointed at your head, you don't throw down the gun with an attitude. No offense to the court card people. You're sitting on the side of the road looking back at the gun, because if you do, someone's going to shoot you. And I have to ask myself, am I looking back at that drink? Because for me, it's like I'm in the high school gym 20 years later. The band's gone, the girls are gone, the lights are out. I'm in this empty room 20 years later saying, where's the party? See, there's no disco ball where I was drinking. That's the euphoric recall. That's the peculiar mental twist. That is the lurking reservation that precedes that first drink. That life has its moments, and for those moments, an alcoholic of my type will give my life to recapture and recreate the magic that I once found in alcohol. And my experience continues to show me that if you take booze away from a drunk like me, you got to give me something better. That's why we say alcoholism is the only disease when treated that will actually leave the sufferer in a better position than if they never had the disease, and I could have never believed that. Dr. Harry Tiebout talks about compliance versus surrender, and I've been in compliance with AA for years, doing it for sober living, doing it for the judicial system, doing it for the parole department, right? Huge difference between compliance and surrender. See, that surrender for me is unconditional. And if you're like me, fear won't keep me sober. Getting a third strike, living on the street, being homeless, losing my big career, throwing away my education. Did scared straight work for you? Went right over my head. Now, the book talks about the problem drinker, right? It illustrates the problem drinker as someone that can stop or moderate, given sufficient reason. Big difference between a problem drinker and a real alcoholic. Think about it. You get a problem drinker and a real alcoholic, in the rubber room for drunk driving. You got two completely different philosophies going on. You got the problem drinker over here on one side of the cell thinking, God, why did I drink so much last night? I knew I shouldn't have drank so much. Real alcoholics on the other side of the cell thinking, why did I take the tent? See, now the court card people don't think that's funny. Right? You should have stayed on Surface Street. You could have been home cleaning your pipe tonight. Problem drinker's wife says, honey, if you don't stop drinking, I'm leaving you. Problem drinker cleans up his act, doesn't drink in the house, get the little Visine. Now, if my woman says, honey, if you don't stop drinking, I'm leaving you, you know what I'm thinking, right? I'm thinking about single life. I mean, if anything got in the way of booze, it was out of my life. I mean, alcohol was the love of my life, right? It had me from hello. It completed me. You think I'm going to let go of the love of my life without a fight? I can't even let go of a bad relationship. Everything I let go of, that's claw marks all over it. If you're laughing, you probably qualify for another program. And if you're new, my relationship today with Alcoholics Anonymous is identical. If anything gets in the way of AA for this drunk, it's out of my life. A woman, I don't care how beautiful she is, how in love we are, my soulmate. I remember the first time I said that in a meeting, there she was in the back of the room. She's looking at me, honey, gosh, you don't look like an alcoholic. Oh my, why do you have to go to all those meetings, sweetie? Oh, you're not speaking again. It's a weekend. Then she tells me, you know, that AA, it's kind of getting in the way of our relationship. So a couple months later, we're still dating. Now it's the big night. You know the big night, right? The big night, meet the parents' night. So she gets me all dressed up, suit and tie, head of the table, parents' house, out comes the exotic wine. She's like, honey, you can have one glass of wine. Oh, please. It's just one glass. It's a toast, honey. It's natural wine. 4 more rehabs. I stole her purse that night. Went down to the hood and got an outside issue. And she came to detox with a get well card. Poor girl. I tried to be helpful. I tried to send her to Codependents Anonymous. She wouldn't go. You know why? She didn't have anyone to go with. I could always tell the Al-Anons, they don't think any of this is funny. Right? Can't stand to see us have a good time even here. So the reality is that Al-Anon eventually saved my life. Because one of the problems with AA, you know what the big problem with AA is? It's full of alcoholics. And what I had to do eventually is take the traditions off the wall and start to understand how they would apply to a relationship. That our common welfare comes first. Our relationship depends on our unity. For our relationship's purpose, there is a loving God as he expresses himself in our relationship. For our, the only requirement is desire to stay in it. And autonomy in this fourth tradition, really the opposite of autonomy is codependence. So intimacy is two people playing different instruments of the same music. It's not two people looking at each other. It's two people with a common goal. And I start to understand that independence or God dependence has to be part of it. And what happened is I started to understand how to bring that back into my family. And my mom, that moved and didn't leave her forwarding address, at 5 years sober, I became her best friend. I got to be the son she had always dreamed of. In fact, maybe better. Because I had the time to love her and take her to museums and take her out and be a part of her life. And eventually take her to doctors and hold her hand when she died. And I learned something. I learned how to take the higher road. Like we say life on life's terms. Someone said that's not enough. Try life on God's terms. We were talking today about my dad. He was a combat war vet. And as a little boy at 9 years old, he was bombed out of his house in London. So all his little friends, a lot of them got killed. And then his mom died at 9 and he joined the military at 14 and went to Korea. And I expect this man to treat me like Mr. Brady. You see, I didn't understand the walk that he had. And he wasn't there for me, just like that workshop today. But when I wrote that inventory and I got to the delusion that his life and the way that conflicted with my belief system. And one day this old man looks at me and he says, son, I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you when you were a little boy. And I healed like that. And now he's my best friend. See, forgiveness is releasing someone from the prison of my own mind, but it's greater than that. It's realizing that I was the prisoner. And the manifestation of that spiritual poison shuts me off, not just from God, it shuts me off from you and myself. And I never thought that these simple ideas could bring me to a place where I went from being the weakest link in my family to the strongest link. We have a joke in Al-Anon. Do you know how many Al-Anons it takes to screw in a light bulb? None. The Al-Anon detaches and lets it screw itself. So when I came back into my mom's life, I had a job, I had a car, I had a life. Now, I'm not giving anybody direction or advice. I'm sharing my experience. That those things, somehow, the serendipity of all the stars lining up at the right time, good sponsorship, a good home group, a sobriety date, a set of instructions outlined in the book, and taking those actions at the same time brought me to a place of empowerment. And I know that it's easy to get distracted. I mean, I have sponsees that pay more in taxes than I earn all year. They have these huge careers and these little tiny programs. I've never seen one of them stand the test of time here. What do I do for a living? I stay sober. What do I do for money? It's over there. I get those two things mixed up, I'm back in handcuffs. I get those two things mixed up, I'm back in an emergency room. Or I get a double header. I'm handcuffed to a gurney in an emergency room. But that has consistently been my experience. Puke smells the same in a Mercedes. If you're like me, self-knowledge won't fix me. I've had every relapse prevention class known to man. And I'm behind a dumpster in Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles with a fifth of whiskey, reciting chapter 5 out of the big book. And the bum next to me is like, will you shut up, man? You're ruining my high. And I'm crying because I can't get back here because I got a head full of Alcoholics Anonymous, I got a belly full of booze, and I'm separate, different, and alone one more time. And if you think that's painful, you know what could be worse than that? Being in this room tonight, being a real alcoholic, and not working the 12 steps. It could be worse. Coming to meetings late, leaving early, not having a sponsor, not having commitments. Right? I mean, we always celebrate 30, 60, 90 days. We have these moments of recognition for the guy in his first 30 days. Maybe we should have a moment of silence for the person in their last 30 days. You can always spot them. Just ask them how they're doing. I'm fine. I'm like, really? Why don't you tell your face that? But you always hear about him later. Remember so-and-so used to sit up in front, he shot himself. He went back to prison. See, I know what it's like to be in my last 30 days. I know what it's like to sit in a room like this, full of happy people, and be brokenhearted and separated. And all of my life, I was one decision away from a drink. One decision. And today, between me and that decision, there's a whole world called Alcoholics Anonymous. It's about people like you. It's about rooms like this. It's about the mystery we call God. It's about commitments. It's like being on a merry-go-round. You could fall off the edge. But if you're in the center of it, you're going to bounce off people. My sponsor used to say, you know, being in the program and on the program, he said, it's not the same thing. I said, what do you mean? It's like being in a submarine or on a submarine. You'll find out when the ship takes a dive whether you're in it or on. See, the knowledge is necessary for me to win the confidence of a newcomer where no one else can. Where the clergy couldn't, the therapist couldn't, the drug and alcohol counselor couldn't, the parole officer couldn't. Another drunk was able to win my confidence because he lived like me. He felt like me. He drank like me. Have you noticed at the end of these meetings, we say, keep coming back, it works if you work it? We don't say, keep coming back, it works if you know it. So until I really understand what the problem is, the solution won't work. And part of the problem for an alcoholic of my type, and is really described in the doctor's opinion. We were talking about it today. The doctor's opinion talks about several different types. It talks about a type that's normal in every respect except the effect produced by alcohol. Normal, able, friendly person. That's not who I am. I have something deeper called a restlessness, irritability, and discontentment, right? What's the new word for restless? Oh, it's ADD. That's it. But see, it really isn't. It really isn't ADD, because if Ed had $1 million in the trunk of his car tonight, I might follow him home. I don't have ADD. I have selective interest disorder. I'm only interested in stuff that really, is pertinent to me. I have this restlessness, this spirit that's never at rest. I have an irritability, which means I have a quickness to anger. I have a slowness to forgive. I keep score in every relationship I'm in, right? I remember everything I should forget. I forget everything I should remember. You know when you're on the phone with AT&T? Quick to anger. And then I have this discontentment, which means the shine wears off everything. It doesn't matter what I get. I get a brand new car to save it all year for this car. I don't even get it off the lot. It's the wrong color. Right, I get a new house. I'm not even out of escrow. Hate the neighbors, hate them. And their dog. I get a new job. I'm making more money I've ever made in my life. I'm sitting there at the office after hours, doing the math, and getting ripped off. And you wonder how well relationships go, right? So I start to see the greater component of what the problem is. And this is very simple. The greater problem for me, you know, we read chapter 5 in every meeting, and it says our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that I'm an alcoholic and I cannot manage my own life. B, that probably no human power can relieve my alcoholism. And C, that God couldn't, would have, sought him. I'm thinking before and after what? What are they talking about? But for an alcoholic of my type, it's before and after I stop thinking. See, the problem drinker thinks the unmanageability is based on drinking. If alcohol's the problem, the solution is abstinence. But for an alcoholic of my type, unless I really understand what that problem is, the solution won't work. And what the problem is for an alcoholic of my type is when I stop drinking, the outsides get better, but the insides get worse. And the longest bridge that I will ever cross, the longest journey that I will ever walk as an alcoholic in recovery is that little dash between the first and second half of step 1. It's telling me I got a body that can't process alcohol, but more importantly, I have a mind that cannot process reality. Not to my liking. So I got a body that can't drink and a mind that has to? You don't think that's a dilemma? And that's what the Al-Anons can't figure out about us. They can't figure out why we drink. We can't figure out why you don't. Well, now you know. So I thought for years, because I drink, therefore my life's unmanageable. That's like looking at the tip of an iceberg and seeing the tip of the iceberg, and I see the broken home, the ruined marriage, the financial destitution, the failing health, and thinking that's the problem. In fact, that's what treatment tells me the problem is. That's why I'm in one more Malibu treatment center in my nightgown, learning about my triggers. And I'm like, counselor, excuse me, counselor, waking up's a trigger for me. I'm awake. And what I eventually discover as I go through this process is that for an alcoholic of my type, the trigger's actually on the inside. Yeah. You ever notice when an alcoholic's not having a good day? You know when I'm not having a good day? When I'm not getting my way. Please, we're all like 5-year-old kids here with old people's faces. Oh, you don't believe it? Cross one of us. I'll resent you for decades. And your grandkids. The problem with resentment in Latin, meaning to refeel, is I take an event from my past, I attach emotion to it, then I refeel it, I rethink it, I reenact it in every area of my life. My life is like Groundhog Day. So I start to see this immaturity, this childish nature, this need to play God. It talks about the actor trying to be the director, right? Trying to arrange the lights, the ballet. But what I don't realize about that scenario is I also gave God a role in my play. And what I eventually see as I go through We Agnostics is how to be rid of those old ideas. The simplicity of these old ideas. I would just talk about this great analogy of this ship that's out on the ocean at night. And the guy that steers the ship, he's called the helmsman, and he's steering the ship, and there's a light on the horizon. So he radios to this light, and he says, turn your course 10 degrees to the north. There's a reply a few minutes later. No, you turn your course 10 degrees to the south. And the light's getting closer. They're panicking. So the helmsman gets back on the radio. Turn your course 10 degrees to the north. Reply, no, you turn your course 10 degrees to the south. Finally, the captain gets on the radio, and he says, we are a battleship. We demand you turn your course 10 degrees to the north. Final reply, I am a lighthouse. Third step idea. Real simple third step idea. Need to play God. The will of God is constant. The Al-Anon idea. If people have to change for me to be happy, what kind of life am I going to have? How do I learn to be free and happy in an imperfect world, in an imperfect family, in a dysfunctional, chaotic family, in an imperfect country? You know, we were talking about it today, the Florida businessman complaining of the state of the nation. It's in the book. The minister of its size over the 20th century, the safecracker that plays victim. All those people think that if the world would change, they would be happy. And what Alcoholics Anonymous has demanded from me is a change from inside, a way to be inwardly reorganized so that eventually I get to a place where I'm free. Because of this need to label and sort and compare and judge. And the book says I have a fear. I have 100 forms of fear. And the further I get away from that drink, the more I see that I have a severe emotional overreaction to 5 things. Abandonment, rejection, betrayal, disrespecting, authority. And every one of those are driven by fear, right? Fear of abandonment. Isn't that the relationship one? Fear of betrayal. I need all her passwords. Fear of disrespect, Holmes, right? More people get killed behind disrespect on the freeways and in prison than all of them put together. Fear of rejection. I'm never going to try anything new, right? And fear of authority. I can't stand being told what to do. And every one of those is based on a faulty relationship with God, based on self-reliance. And what I discover as I go through this process is I will never solve a spiritual problem with a physical solution. You guys remember Gilligan's Island? This is a group that would remember it, right? If you're too young, go to Hulu. But it never occurred to me that Gilligan's Island was the 7 deadly sins. The captain was gluttony, Gilligan was sloth, Mary Ann was envy, Ginger was lust, Mr. Howe was greed, the professor was pride. I would have killed everyone on the island but Ginger. Now, I would have kept Mary Ann around for a little drama, right? I don't like Pradilla. But see, I start to see the manifestation of the spiritual malady. I put down the drink, I pick up the fork, right? Next thing you know, I'm on my knees in the mirror, naked, saying, God, I can't live like this. 6 and 7. Then I put down the fork, I pick up the credit card, right? Then I'm in liposuction. I'm buying clothes, trying to, fix what I did with the fork. Then I'm on my knees in federal bankruptcy court, saying, God, I can't live like this anymore. 6 and 7, right? Then I put down the credit card, start acting out in the rooms. Can't go to that meeting again. And what I discover is, like we were talking about today, this spiritual malady will manifest in all these behaviors, and I shall not judge. because it's part of being human. Every one of these. If you're new, don't let that shame take you out of Alcoholics Anonymous. Getting sober and getting long-term recovery here is almost like learning to play the violin in public naked. Everyone's gonna see it. And what I discovered is the elder statesman, what we were talking about a little while ago, we don't love you in spite of these defects. If we're truly forgiving, we love you because of them. And the three most important words in Alcoholics Anonymous are, yeah, me too. I felt like that too. You know, and that was the discovery. Thinking it through doesn't work for me. I love it when they say, just play the tape through. I'm driving my new car down the 10 freeway past Skid Row, downtown LA. You know, my head tells me, you know, Skid Row wasn't that bad. Right? At least I can get a gate down there. That's the insanity. That's the insanity of alcoholism. See, I always thought the insanity was doing the same thing and expecting different results, right? Isn't that what you hear in AA? That's not the insanity I live with. The insanity I live with is doing the same thing, knowing exactly what's going to happen, and what? Doing it anyway. I mean, at least the other kind of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results, at least there's some hope there. So I start to look at this insanity a little differently. I don't want to offend anybody here. I know there's a couple of kids here, but I mean, to pick up a drink's kind of like having sex with a gorilla. Now, if you have sex with a gorilla, honey, it ain't over till the gorilla says it's over. That monkey starts looking at you with those loving eyes, right? Remember how it used to be, just me and you? No one's going to know we're in Mexico. And that will always be there. That idea that somehow, someday, I would control and enjoy my drink. That lurking reservation. To play the tape through. That delusion. Reminds me of this guy that gets a rifle for his birthday. We were talking about he's a hunter, right? And he gets this rifle for his birthday, and he's always wanted to shoot a polar bear. So he goes up to the tundra. He sees this bear. He takes his shot. He's looking at this polar bear. He's looking at his kill and tap on his shoulder. Bigger polar bear looking down at him. You just shot my son. You got two choices. You either let me have my way with you, or I'm going to maul you to death. A couple days later, he's healing up in the hospital. Now he's got a resentment, right? So he flies back up to the tundra. He gets his gun out. He sees his prey. He shoots this bear. He's looking at his bear. Tap on his shoulder. Bigger polar bear looking down at him. You just shot my uncle. You get two choices. You either let me have my way with you, or I'm going to maul you to death. Now he's back in the hospital again. He's got another resentment. This goes on for years. Back and forth. Back and forth. Finally, he's up there. He sees the bear. He takes his shot. He's looking at his kill. Tap on his shoulder. It's the king of the polar bears looking down at him. The king of the polar bears says, you know, we've been watching you. You're not really up here for the hunting, are you? Now, if you read the Jaywalker in the Big Book, it's not really that far out there. You know, I'm 120 pounds dying of alcoholism thinking I'm having a good time. But see, just like herding cattle, you got 4 horsemen that run that herd. Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. If I'm in the center of that herd, I don't realize where I'm going. You know where we're going, right? Slaughterhouse. And if you're new, how easy it is to be in the center of this and to be driven by selfishness and dishonesty and resentment and fear and not realize it. And that is the spiritual awakening, the psychic change, to realize. If you feel like a black sheep in your family, welcome to the herd of black sheep. Now we're going to judge each other. And I start to see the truth. One of the things my sponsor said to me, he said, Adam, what do you want from AA? You keep recycling through these rooms. And I said, I grew up in Malibu. I want a yacht and a Learjet. And you know what he said to me? He said, if you work steps 4 through 9 and you consistently live in 10, 11, and 12, what you'll get, because I'm a taker, I'm here to get something. He says, what you'll get is a quiet mind and a loving heart. And I remember thinking, what do I want that for? But think about the opposite of a quiet mind. It's a mind that won't shut up. It's a mind that's up at 3 in the morning. It's like that vulture on the bedpost that tells me I don't need AA. I don't need to pray today. I don't need to go to a meeting. I don't need to maintain commitments. I'm really saying, God, I don't need your help. And the opposite of a loving heart is a vindictive heart. It's a prejudiced heart. It's a racist heart. In all of my life, I'd been crucified between two thieves, yesterday and tomorrow. In yesterday, I have guilt, shame, and remorse. In tomorrow, I have fear, anxiety, and worry. The product of these 12 steps over a long period of time is they bring about a change in perception. Just like that triangle, recovery, unity, and service, I was trained to see that that's 3 actions: contribute, belong, and learn. Contributing is service. The more that I do it, the more that I feel needed. Belonging is unity. The more that I do it, the more that I feel wanted. And to learn is to uncover, discover, and discard that which is blocking me. Like they said, when they asked Michelangelo, how did you make the statue of David? He said, I never made the statue of David. I just chipped away everything that wasn't David, and there he was. This very simple idea. If I stand at the door of an AA meeting and I say, hi, I'm Adam, hi, I'm Adam, hi, I'm Adam, it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter how I feel. If I do that consistently, I will walk in that meeting and people will stick their hand out to me. And what I discovered is I cannot separate cause from effect. There used to be a therapy, right, called cognitive behavioral therapy. It's expensive. In AA, it's one sentence. You can't think your way into right living, but I can live my way into right thinking. And I diligently take these actions over a period of time. And what happens is the steps bring me wisdom. The fellowship where 2 or more are gathered bring me power. And by being of service and reaching back in my community, for the first time, I can feel love. If someone did to me what I did to myself, I would have killed them. Right? Come on. If someone did to me what I did to others, I would have killed them. And then I come to AA, and you want me to pray to God. I didn't want God to find out where I was. I become bankrupt in those very simple primary relationships. If you're new, if you really look at the 12 steps, if you look at the step, they really recreate those 3 relationships. 1 through 3, recreate and develop a relationship with God. 4 through 7, recreate and develop a relationship with self. 8 and 9, recreate and develop a relationship with others. Very simple idea. 10, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with self. 11, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with God. And 12, through service, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with others. So coming out of the step, the selfish, self-centered drunk like me is not only easily able to control my desire for alcohol, because that's huge, but I'm able to live in harmony with God's self and others. There was a great spiritual teacher. He was asked, what's the most important thing of all your teachings? What did he say? Love God with all thy heart, love thy neighbor as thyself. And if God scares you out of AA and you're a real drunk, don't worry about it. Booze will scare you back in. So in 1 through 3, I give it up. 4 through 7, I clean it up. 8 and 9, I make it up. 10, 11, and 12, I keep it up. And as a result of that, I'm able to navigate around the drama. I'm able to match calamity with serenity. I'm able to stay in fit spiritual condition. I'm able to actually have relationships that work. So like in the Keys of the Kingdom, he says, in exchange for a hangover and a bottle, I found a way to be wanted, needed, and loved. It is just the way the formula works. It's very simple. One of the things that happened to me when I got out of that 28 treatment center is the guy that was running the detox said to me, Adam, why don't you come back to the detox next week and tell everybody how you stayed sober a whole week, if you can make it. You know, and that's how he said it, so I got a resentment. So for the next 8 years, I sat in 2 hours of bumper-to-bumper traffic from South LA to the West Valley to tell a bunch of strangers in this detox how I made it a whole week, and I was tricked into service. And the reason I could never get sober for all those years is because I wasn't willing to give any. And what I found out in the real world, there's two kinds of people. There's givers and there's takers. 90% of the world takers, 10% givers. And if you think the ratio in AA isn't much different, it isn't. You don't believe it? Wait till they ask for cleanup tonight. What I found out, it was the givers that were having all the fun. In the long haul, it was the givers that stay here. And that was the beauty, to find out how to stay here. My friend, one of the old-timers I know said, you know, if you don't like the old-timers in AA, don't worry about it. You'll never be one. I'm like, wow, that was hardcore. Right? So I started getting around these old-timers that had long-term recovery, that had wisdom. You think if a guy doesn't know how to use a cell phone, he doesn't know anything about spirituality, that's fool it. The old-timers showed me how to live. They showed me the spiritual wisdom that would teach me how to have joy. If I don't follow society's rules, I live in a cage. If I don't follow AA's rules, I live drunk. And if I don't follow God's rules, I stay in misery. And what happened to me, like a lot of us, is I became teachable. There's two dates in a man's life: the day he's born, the day he finds out why. And I thought helping another drunk was beneath me. Right? Someone of my caliber should have at least been a senator, right? And you know what? Working with new people. Some of these guys out of prison, like I was saying today, all of a sudden I'm the best man at their wedding. I'm the godfather of their kids. I'm their mom's hero. Every once in a while, one becomes a great dad, a great daughter, a great son. One goes to law school. One graduates college. And to see the fellowship that we see growing up around us. If you don't believe in life after death, look around AA. We have something so powerful here. So powerful. There's a poem in Notre Dame that says, I sought my God I could not see. I sought my soul I could not free. I sought my brother, and I found all three. And it never occurred to me when Bill Wilson met Dr. Bob that when he says nothing ensures immunity from drinking more than incentive work with others, that would be my salvation. When I'm having a bad day, I need a meeting. When I'm having a great day, a meeting needs me. And the purpose of coming to meetings is because partly that's where they keep the newcomers, right? But there's a constant flow of people looking for help, looking for a way out, looking for a solution. And if you're in spiritual pain, trust me, again, like I said earlier, the only disease when treated that will leave the sufferer in a better position than that they never had the disease. And almost 20 years later, you know what? I became the strongest link in that family. You know, Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon mended my family. It gave me a life worth living. I'd lived in institutions for 17 years. Those therapists were chasing me around saying, what kind of meds are you on? I'm like, I'm on the 12 antidepressants on the wall. And AA has no judgment on page 133 about that. But that's my experience. That when I started taking the actions I was asked to take in Alcoholics Anonymous and following these instructions, I became empowered. I became empowered. Einstein said I would rather live my life pretending there's a God and finding out there isn't than live my life pretending there's no God and finding out there is. What a simple idea. The definition of hell is if God were to show me all the things I might have accomplished if I'd only believed in myself. If you're like me, I could not believe in myself. I lost faith. But I came to believe in Alcoholics Anonymous. I came to believe in people like you. I'll close with this, probably the oldest story in AA. Someone might have said it this weekend. It's about a 5-year-old kid, and he's trying to, he's playing with this. He's trying to find a way. The guy's an accountant. He's trying to find his way to occupy this little 5-year-old son of his. So what he does is he gets this map of the world, and he rips this map of the world up into like 50 pieces, and he gives it to his 5-year-old son, and he says, put this map of the world back together, and when you're done, we'll play. And he's thinking it's going to take this little boy an hour. This little boy comes back in 2 minutes. He's got this whole map of the world taped back together. The dad says, I'm like 50 years old. I couldn't do that. How'd you do it, son? It's impossible. And the little boy says, Dad, on the back of the map of the world, there was a picture of a man. I just put the man back together, and the whole world fell into slavery. And if you're new, in many ways, that is the spiritual technology of Alcoholics Anonymous, to rebuild the man or woman. 1 through 3 with God, 4 through 7 with self through inventory, 8 and 9 with others through amends, and then to maintain, develop, and grow those 3 relationships. And you know what? Like most of us, what happened is I got free. It is my tendency to fix the map first, right? Get the job, the house, the girl in the car, and then play musical poisons until I'm back in detox. And when I rebuilt through the steps, these simple relationships, my life worked. You know, and that's all I got. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Thank you.